Hey, welcome back, viewer. I wanted to talk about what I have dubbed words that inflame. And the word I have chosen for today is oppressed and oppression. These words have come into the common vernacular. They are thrown around so much, especially in politics these days. It's tightly tied to things like critical social justice, which is ultimately rooted out of the thinking of the Frankfurt School, which were guys from I think France, Germany, Europe, who were Marxists, but they were disappointed by the failures of Marxism and created some new ideas, which ultimately were dubbed the Frankfurt School and linked to what would eventually become things like critical theory, critical race theory, things like that, um, all fueling this lens of uh, what do we put it here? Oppressor, oppressed, uh, ideology, perspective. Okay, so that's where this is coming from. This is why the word is thrown around so much. It's coming out of that background. But I don't want to talk about that. That's not what I want to talk about. I just want to talk about what the word does, how it affects people's mental health, I think. So I've got my lovely chart of cognitive distortions up here. I love using this with clients. It's got all kinds of distortions. I don't think you can see all these. You see all these? Can I move it? There it is. Can I scroll through it like this? Oh, now it's short. Okay, wow. Having a moment here. Okay, there we go. Let's get them on the screen. Okay, so why do I think the word oppressed inflames? Inflames. So, I was going to define it. Let me start with the definition. Okay, I'm using the 1828 Webster Dictionary. And it says the oppression means the act of oppressing, the imposition of unreasonable burdens, either in taxes or services, cruelty or severity, state of being oppressed or overburdened, misery. Uh, the Lord saw the oppression of Israel, 2 Kings 8:1. Hardship, calamity, depression, dullness of spirits, lassitude of body. I don't know what lassitude means. I'll need to look up in the dictionary what that word means. And a sense of heaviness or weight in the breast. Okay, so there's a definition for oppression. I think we have a general idea of what we think of with the word oppression. It's a big word. We can use it in light ways. We can use it in big ways, and yet I think the word tends to have a dramatic flair to it. We can use it literally. We can use it more sarcastically, like I'm being oppressed, right? We can use it jokingly. But when it's used seriously, when it's used in political debate and social debate, I think that's where it has this dramatic flair that is um, unhelpful to public discourse and unhelpful to people's mental health. The word oppressed, I think, often is used in a catastrophizing sort of way. Let's find that on the chart. Catastrophizing, magnification. So I think that socially can often, in modern times, be used in a sense that whatever policy is being supported or proposed or enacted by the other political party is oppressive, is causing oppression, that I'm being oppressed because of whatever those policies are. And then, of course, whoever's claiming to be oppressed will cite, well, these are the consequences of the policy. And I think what's lost in that kind of discourse or way of thinking is that the reality of government, of any sort of government, whether it's parliamentary systems, democratic systems, a constitutional republic like ours, even monarchies, or even dictatorships, the reality is that regardless of the type of government that it is governments create laws, they enforce them, they make people do things they don't want to do. They impose the will of the government onto society. And when that's operating really well, when you have representation, then hopefully the laws being imposed are pretty representative of the people of that particular nation, and the sorts of laws that they want in place, right? And the farther it gets away from what the will of most of the people are, or the majority of the people, then probably the farther away it is getting from, I don't know. It's probably the more it's going away from the people's will, the more it's probably going towards oppression. Though at the same time, I think a place like America, where we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights, which are set above above like it is the law of the land, so it's above the other things. It's above the three branches of government, and that like the Bill of Rights restricts what the government can do in order to protect the people, and so that could even be even the rights of a minority group of people can still be protected by those constitutional rights, even if the majority wants to take it away. If the majority wanted to take away freedom of religion or freedom of speech or the right to bear arms or the right to not incriminate yourself and be secure in your persons, or to take away the right to not have to house troops in your home or whatever it may be, then the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, is still there to protect even that minority group of people who still want to um, and need to be protected by those rights. So, where was I? But governments enforce things on people. They enforce taxes on people. They enforce rules on people. It's what governments do. So there's what governments do in some sense, you might say, well, the very entity of government itself is always, to some degree, an oppressive system. Someone is always going to be under the thumb of that government, because that's the point. When people come together and go, we're going to have a government, and the law of that government is going to protect people's properties, protect people's rights, go, okay, then stealing property or hurting or killing, murdering people is wrong, then the person who does the stealing or the person who does the assault or the murder is going to then be held accountable and get jailed, imprisoned, punishment of some kind. And then that person could be framed, especially if they don't like being punished and held accountable. They could be framed as a victim of that system. They could be framed as oppressed or view themselves as oppressed. So, uh, in that case, the criminal within the criminal justice system could be framed as the oppressed in the system. Um, and yet the rest of society, the people who want their property protected, the people who want their rights to be protected, don't want it to be allowable to be harmed. Like those people obviously would view this as justice, would view it as the right thing, that of course the criminal being punished is not oppressed, is not a victim, rather it is the rightful punishment happening. So my point in laying that out is the lens that you take, the lens that you put on the situation is going to like vastly significantly shape how you view it, how you're emotionally impacted by it. You know, if you think that it's wrong to, let's say, lock up people who steal things, and you think that that's oppression, then that's going to change your whole view of like most governments in the world. You know, I view most government, or every government perhaps in the world, as being oppressive systems. Like, I mean, most people don't want to be stolen from, so most places have laws against that. But if you happen to be the kind of person who wants to steal things and wants things for yourself and thinks that's okay, then the system could be viewed as oppression, and that would be a pretty helpless state to be in if that was the case. I don't know, I'm joking here because like there's people who would feel this way, but this is meant to be like a ridiculous example. But if you thought the entire world should be different than it was, if you thought that every government is governing in the wrong sort of way, that would and was oppressive, that would not feel very good, right? That would not probably be good for one's mental health. You'd feel either really helpless or feel like you're gonna have to like fight that system. Or I suppose you could feel neutral about it or change your perspective and no longer view it that way. Something would have to change within you to go, well, maybe it's not that the system is oppressive because it's maintaining these laws. Maybe the thing that is wrong is in my own head and the way that I'm thinking about it. So anyway, oppression, oppressed, it catastrophizes, it makes it huge. It also makes it all or nothing. Let's find the all or nothing sort of thinking here. So it's like it basically tends towards I'm either oppressed or I'm not oppressed. I'm in the oppressor role or I'm in the victim role. It's very all or nothing kind of thinking that is happening. And when you've got all or nothing thinking, when you've got catastrophizing thinking, that's probably not going to be, again, good for your mindset in society. It's going to um, let me scroll down here. Oh, it's gonna fuel feelings of being a victim, a victimhood. It's gonna fuel resentment, a sense of injustice, anger, helplessness. It might provoke you to lawful actions like getting into politics and protesting and things like that. It could provoke towards unlawful actions, towards becoming violent or revolutionary, and it could be that perspective could fuel violent and dangerous behaviors, or it could fuel helplessness, which I think I put above helplessness. That could maybe feed into feelings of depression, not feeling very empowered. That's not a great state to be in. Let's see. I think that when the term oppression is thrown around too cavalierly and used excessively in politics, when it's thrown around at every sort of policy that people don't like, that it ends up minimizing the freedoms that we actually have. That I have the freedoms to post a video like this on the internet. I don't have to worry about being taken down. Uh, corporations can take down videos, but I mean, as far as the government taking it down, if if the government did that, then we have recourse for that. There's still just countless ways that we have freedoms in America, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to assemble peacefully, the right to engage in worship and things like that. People can trash talk on the internet. We can criticize our government, our leaders. We can assemble, and so long as it's not illegal behavior taking place, and assemble and have protests and things like there's all kinds of freedoms that we do have, and the, calling more of the nuanced things oppression, I think minimizes appreciation for how much freedom that we have. Like it doesn't take into account the whole scope of things because it's the all or nothing thinking happening. Uh, and it also minimizes the progress of the freedoms that we have through the ages. So if you compare America and the freedoms that we have right now to the freedoms that were had, if you look at like 100 years ago, let's say, I think I would think that, let's say, on the women's rights front, that women have a lot more freedoms than they were experiencing 100 years ago. So when's 100 years ago? 1926. That would have been early on in like women's suffrage coming around. So you go back, and there's lots of rights as far as more rights for there's voting rights for women, voting rights for minorities. So there's lots of things. There's lots of progress that has happened um, through that time, and when things are looked at in through the lens of oppression and victimhood. I think that it minimizes that actually compared to, it's like, what other time of history was better than this in many regards? Now I know on both sides of the aisle people could pick at things, and I'm trying to avoid any specifics here, but in general, what kind of freedoms do you have now compared to freedoms of the past in this country? Is it as dire as the media or TikTok or YouTube or whatever would make it seem? Yep, I already hit on that point. Also, like, if this is oppression, if you feel like living in this country or living in a Western country, like, or I want to be specific to America because things in America are different than things going on in some of the other Western countries, Europe. But if this is oppression, then where is oppression not happening? So, what country would you look at? This is a Socratic question. What country would you look at and say, well, oppression's not happening there? Where would you look at through time and history and go, well, oppression isn't happening there? And that's where I think this fuels into then an unproductive, utopic style of thinking that, if America, the place that like everybody wants to come to basically, or most people want to come to, that people from all over the world would love to be at. It's still, regardless of the political things happening, I think regarded as quite a beacon in the world of freedom and prosperity. Even in dire economic times for us, the power of the dollar is still so much more powerful than other countries. We still have so many more freedoms than other countries, and yet when we're in the bubble of living here, it can be hard to see that. We go by what it seems like in our own country rather than the comparison of like come from another country where they don't have the same rights and freedoms or they don't have the same economic power, and it's easy to not recognize the difference there. And so again, with the utopic style thinking, it's like the reality is that there is no perfect country. There never was a perfect country. There never will be a perfect country. Again, the role of government is always going to serve a role of dictating, controlling, enforcing the sorts of things that people do, enforcing the will of the people or the state. Hopefully, those are more aligned, but there's always going to be people impacted by that, disproportionately impacted by that, who are upset by it, don't like it, or feel oppressed by it. There is no situation whereby there wouldn't be this, and that's just me saying that. That's just my perspective and opinion. You can think about it. The Socratic question would be something like, where has, as I put up here, like where has oppression not occurred? How do systems that attempt to solve oppression even fail to do that? How do systems that attempt to solve oppression fail? How do they result in new forms or unexpected forms of oppression? Right? I mean, that's the thought. It's like it's easy to complain about how things are, but it's a lot harder to build something else that isn't broken in some other way. So how if you take down the present form and try to rebuild it so that there's not oppression, how does that in unanticipated ways also create other forms of oppression? Anyway, but that leads me to, I think this was my final point, that like if you're finding that you can't be happy here, that you're feeling oppressed in this nation, then where would you be happy? What time period would you be happy in? What nation would you be happy in? What set of circumstances would you be happy in? Right? And depending on which side or where you are on the aisle between because this definitely touches on politics, where you are from left to right. There's going to be different answers to that. And yet, is there anything that really meets that? Is there anything that realistically meets that? Because if you land on, well, I would be oppressed anywhere, I can't really be happy anywhere, or the circumstances or the expectations are something that's never existed, then I mean, if you can't find happiness, contentment, and joy when we have this level of prosperity, when we have this level of freedoms, prosperity and freedoms that most of the world, that many places in the world don't enjoy, that most of the world didn't enjoy throughout civilization. Like if you're feeling oppressed, you're feeling like a victim in that context, then does that mean you would feel oppressed and like a victim in any context? In which case, what is that mindset doing for you? How is that helping you? How is that helping your mental health? How is viewing things through that lens of being oppressed, that if whatever the policies are, you're oppressed because of them? Like, if that's getting in the way of you being able to be happy, content, productive, successful, pursuing the things of life that give you joy and meaning, well, I mean, that would be a problem. So I think I guess my whole point would come down to, I think there's a lot more nuance, that we need more nuance, that it's helpful to have more nuance to perspective, that it's not black and white like oppressors and oppressed. It is not all or nothing. That the thinking, that a more flexible form of thinking that looks at things in more nuanced ways is a more functional way of tackling social issues and politics. Where, you know what, if there's a policy that I don't like, that if there's something being pushed socially that I don't like, it's not, oh, my rights are taken away, oh, I'm so oppressed, but rather, if it is rights, what are those rights? Maybe it is rights. I mean, there's maybe I'll make a separate video on this, but there's like classic constitutional rights, which are tend to be like, they're called negative rights. They're things that the government basically can't take away from you. And then there's different perspective, which are positive rights, which are things that people expect basically the government to provide for them. And those are very different perspectives, very different uses of the word rights. And so there's the person who feels like they're over in Virginia, they passed a bunch of gun laws. So someone who really cares about their Second Amendment rights feels oppressed because their gun rights are being taken away, and the right to bear arms are being taken away. Than for someone who has a positive rights perspective, that the government, that they have a right to be provided things from the government, feels like, well, if they have to pay a health insurance company, they can't pay for health insurance, they can't pay for medical procedures, whatever, and feel like it should be the government, that there should be socialized health care, that the government should be paying for them, then that person feels oppressed because their right to healthcare isn't being provided for them. So you see, again, the lens that you use is shaping how you view the situation. If you have no expectation that the government is going to provide or ought to be providing some service for you, then it not doing that doesn't feel like oppression. If being armed and defending yourself is the furthest thing you could possibly want, you view weapons as only sources of harm and used by criminals and things like that, and you don't want them around, then things like laws that ban guns, that infringe on that Second Amendment, then that's that's the furthest thing away from oppression to you, because you think that there is no right to those things, and that it's good for those things to be limited, right? It depends on the lens that you come at this from. So what's my point in all this is that I'm not saying that the word oppressed doesn't have a role in our language. Of course it is. Of course, there's situations in which oppression is occurring, and even there's times to use it as dramatic flair, and yet it just, I think that it's being that the excessive use of it, that viewing too many situations from a lens of oppression ends up feeding something toxic to the human soul and toxic to one's mental health, because then you can feel this anger and resentment and feel the weight of the boot on one's head, the force of being oppressed. And if that is because of your lens, if that's more in your mind than in reality, then that's that's probably not boding well for your mental health. And that means if it's more in your head and more through the lens that you're putting on, then likewise, that means from reframing it to looking for the nuance of the situation, from accepting that there is no utopia. There is always going to be some level and some people feeling like they're being oppressed by the system. There's always going to be people that have perspective on that. If you, uh, if what you want to do violates the norms of that system or that law, then then you're going to feel that way. Those are my those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do we need to be calling everything oppressed, or is the word being used too much to the detriment of people's mental health? What do you think about that? And thanks, and I'll see you next time.
Please see the following disclaimer. The views on this channel are solely my own for educational purposes. They don't represent my employer or any other entity. The channel does not create a therapist-client relationship and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Any suggestions or recommendations are used at your own risk.